Welcome back. So should we continue in alphabetical order? Are you okay with that? Yeah. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Chapter 1. Peg. What kind of spiritual journey begins with a young girl lip-syncing hymns in the church choir? The choir director stopped the organ and once again held out over her shoulder, "Someone is off key. Is that you, Margaret?" Of course it was. But there were only 6 people in the choir, including me. They needed my body more than my voice. Insight. There's more than one way to make a contribution. My grandfather, Gilbert Lamar, was a minister, and he had built this tiny church in the small Wisconsin resort village of Fontana on Lake Geneva. He built it literally, setting local stone by hand, and visited his parishioners on foot, listening patiently to their worries and woes, praying with them, tending them. If you want a true spiritual home, you might have to build it yourself.
So Kim, can you fix it so that it shows the spread in that window?
Well, but then it would be smaller. That's the problem.
Well, the real problem is that there's going to be copy on the right-hand side. So it's going to be,
Well, I was thinking after we do the reading for the thing, we'd go to the right-hand side. But
a page. Okay.
if people can read it, I can make the screen wider too. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Okay, so I think it's then Donna.
Mhm.
Mike, where are we exactly now?
I did not have a lot of contact.
Oh, okay, thank you. I did not have a lot of contact with my grandfather growing up, but I felt his deep kindness in every encounter. And when my parents divorced and our family moved back to Fontana, I would attend that tiny Fontana community church regularly, lip syncing faithfully in the choir. Even though he had long since retired to California. Maybe that's what sparked my interest in the spiritual path. My parents, though, were lapsed Unitarians, if there can be such a thing. And we were a Navy family, constantly on the move, unchurched.
And did he do all the woodwork too?
No, he did the stonework and the exterior. I think they had a carpenter build that interior. And I think it's you, Kim.
Yeah, I'm just looking. It's so beautiful. And those wings are always added later, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's tiny.
So when I went to the University of Iowa studying creative writing and literature, I took a course in the Bible as literature and a course in comparative religion taught by the renowned professor George Forel,
Well,
who had written books on the Protestant faith. It should come as no surprise that this course took a manifest destiny approach to religion, starting with paganism, then Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism and marching steadily westward through Judaism toward Christianity and ultimately Protestantism, the California of religions. We read original text for each religion, which is how I encountered Three Pillars of Zen by D.T. Suzuki in mid-October.
It was a revelation that shook my world. Here, finally, was a most surprising religion, one that depended on meditation and deep inquiry, not beliefs we were supposed to adopt somehow. And the outcome was not heaven or hell, but enlightenment. You go on ahead, I thought. I'm planting my flag right here. The rest is just hand waving and fairy tales. Or, as one Zen teacher described it, milk to stop the crying of infants. There, too, I began to study the Chan poets, and at the same time, I was actively engaged in the protests against the war in Vietnam. I blocked military recruiters, organized medic tents, wrote pamphlets and posters, got maced, got arrested. These protests taught me the limits of my own capacity to create change, to mend the world through anger and protest.
Meanwhile, I became involved with the Encounter Group movement and became a student trainer for these weekends of college students bearing our soul under the benevolent neglect of psychology professors who were studying this phenomenon for its therapeutic potential. I learned there the power of honest encounter, vulnerability, and mutual care. I was idealistic. I started a commune, about 43 college students living together in an abandoned fraternity house. This was my earliest exploration of social organization as a full democracy, which resulted in many deep friendships, as well as tedious and contentious 4- and 5-hour house meetings about trivial issues, unresolvable conflicts, struggle, and strife. Speaking of freedom, should male students be allowed to lie around in the nude with their doors open, even if it offended some of the females? Can some be compelled to take their turn washing dishes? It was a great teaching for me in what can fall apart in groups without shared principles, ethics, direction, path, practices, or aspiration. What happens when egoic preoccupations, the self-centered dream, blinds us to the principle of mutual care? Pure democracy doesn't necessarily bring people together. It can be rudderless, unethical, unenlightened, and prone to conflict and factions.
This is
Starlit, you want to read about encounter groups?
Yes, please, could you make it larger?
Yeah.
Thank you. Encounter groups, also known as T groups, are a form of group training where participants, typically between 8 and 15 people, learn about themselves and about small group processes in general through their interaction with each other. The concept of encounter is a meeting of two, eye to eye, face to face, was articulated by J.L. Moreno in Vienna in 1914-15. In his, I'm not going to read it, I don't know German, Invitation to an Encounter. A T group meeting does not have an explicit agenda, structure, or express goal. Under the guidance of a facilitator, the participants are encouraged to share emotional reactions, for example, anger, fear, warmth, or envy. that arise in response to their fellow participants' actions and statements. The emphasis is on sharing emotions as opposed to judgments or conclusions. In this way, T group participants can learn how their words and actions trigger emotional responses in the people they communicate with. That is a beautiful photo.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we're back to Anne.
Meanwhile, I became involved with the oh, no,
We did that.
we've already done that.
Yeah, you read that part.
Okay.
Under the
Practicing Zen.
I was practicing Zen. Yeah.
I was practicing Zen, or at least what I thought of as Zen, based on my reading, since I didn't have a teacher or a spiritual community, a Sangha. I would continue in this hapless way for 23 years in intermittent solitary meditation, or what I imagined was meditation. Mostly, it was just a muddle. But I longed for the peaceful, beautiful life of a Zen monastic in a proper Japanese temple, where I could at last become enlightened.
Ironically, it was my sister who married a Japanese man, not a Zen practitioner, alas, but an international banker. And so I was finally able to visit Japan and the magnificent temples of Kyoto with their incredible gardens, Buddha halls, altars, calligraphy, flowers, and art. How I longed for that exquisite, peaceful Zen life. I glimpsed there, little aware how much of it was utterly unavailable to me then. A woman and a Westerner at that. My guide, my sister's husband was impatient, however, his head filled with international oil tanker leases and complex derivatives. He was a modern businessman, and this was all ancient, boring history to him. Up 108 stairs, down 108 stairs, a moss garden, a big altar, a 208-year-old pine with a tiny ancient man pruning it needle by needle. High up in its branches, another temple and another. You can buy a postcard over there, he said, exasperated as I stopped to snap a photo of monks chanting before a huge bell. Even as his furious clip, however, I was in awe.
By 1976, I had fallen in love and married Bill, a wonderful extrovert, funny, with a great zest for life and a true creative partner. He had graduated as a landscape architect, so when we moved to a small farm in Wisconsin, we started a landscape business, Syverson Landscapes. We worked very well together. He was an artistic genius who designed the plans and had encyclopedic knowledge of trees and plants, boulders, brick and wood, and he was a natural teacher loved by our crews. I managed the administration, estimating, bookkeeping, client communication, advertising, and branding and general support.
So, Lynn, this would be your point, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
That little farm with its chickens, how do you say that
Marauding.
Marauding.
again?
Marauding.
Marauding, thank you. Marauding raccoons, horses, geese, cat and dogs, mice, and barns, swallows, along with our landscape work, was the beginning of my learning about independent living systems and the artful creation of natural beauty. Still, we had a lot to learn about running a business. We exhausted our savings and Bill's retirement in the first 2 years. We needed help. Ultimately, we found landscape consultants we knew we could not afford, but their first 3 days with us actually paid for their fee. The organic growth of Syverson landscapes was guided by these expert consultants and great success. This taught me the importance. Well, I'll stop there.
Oh, okay. I think it's me then. This taught me the importance of expert knowledge and guidance as you create and grow an organization. You don't have to figure everything out yourself. You can get help from experts if you're willing to admit that you need it. My son Ben was born there, and it seemed we would be happy the rest of our lives in that small paradise. But in 1981, the country began to go into a deep and long recession, and our consultants advised us that our business would not be sustainable through it. That was important, painful information. We were able to sell everything and move to San Diego, where my mother lived. Paradise was shattered, our hearts were broken, and we had no money. We had some very difficult times in that transition.
I began to work at Harcourt Brace Jovanovich, a prominent publisher of trade books and textbooks. I worked with my senior editor there to create, from the ground up, a new children's dictionary, the Lincoln Dictionary for Writing, still in print. It was very innovative. It incorporated brief articles about the craft of writing, and it used quotes from famous writers as example sentences in word definitions. It also incorporated photos and illustrations from the text, just like this book. But my marriage was breaking down, engulfed by Bill's persistent depression. Although we did not know it, his depression was actually caused by heart disease. He needed a 5-way heart bypass. Despite successful surgery, ultimately, he returned to Wisconsin and we were divorced. It was a wrenching, heartbreaking loss for both of us and for Ben. Should I keep reading?
Starlet.
Okay.
Sorry, could you make it a little bit bigger? Thank you, Kim. By then, I had returned to graduate school in a small program for research on the teaching of writing directed by Charles Cooper, who became my graduate advisor and my second creative partner, as I assisted in developing teaching methods and textbooks. In the first year writing program, under his expert guidance, I began to learn the craft of teaching. I learned so much with my first year writing students, who proved to be my perfect teachers.
I also had the opportunity to work as a research associate with Mary Barr on the California Learning Record, which provided a way for K through 12 teachers to document and evaluate student learning based on what they know and can do, rather than their errors or deficits. I learned with her a holistic and and positive way of seeing, learning, and making sense of it. She was a great mentor for me and for so many teachers and administrators. Later, I would expand this project to create a learning record for college-level learners, learningrecord.org, which earned numerous awards. And even later still, I would develop the learning record for spiritual practice, which is how we now use, which we now use in our one-year precepts program.
Is Donna
I was,
not? Oh, there.
I think
are you-
it's,
okay.
I was also fortunate, is that it?
Yeah.
I was also fortunate to take classes and study with Ed Hutchins in the cognitive science department and to hang out in the lab. He taught me how to think in systems and ecologies of knowing that included people, their environments, social structures, tools, and technologies. In his lab, he trained the graduate students and me in rigorous critical thinking and creative approaches to research. All of these influences factored into my dissertation, The Wealth of Reality and I can't say that, ecology of
Mhm.
composition, which received 2 national awards in my field. But that dissertation could never have been written if I had not met Jaka, so to whom we will turn now.
I'm going to enlarge this.
Well, this is just the original website for the Learning Record Project. I think now has about maybe 7,000 or 8,000 users. Okay, we don't have to read that. Just gives you a sense of the website.
Chapter 2, Joko. In 1990, I was in my second year of graduate school working 3 jobs, teaching in the 3rd college writing program and raising a young son as a single parent. I was stretched to the maximum, and I knew I needed something to support me. I began searching for Zen centers in San Diego. This was no easy task because the web had not yet been invented and the Yellow Pages was no help. As Zen centers tended not to advertise, I'm not sure how I discovered that there were 2 Zen centers in the city. I wrote to each, inquiring about their programs and schedules.
From one, I received a 6-page typed single-space letter from the teacher about how wonderful he was. From the other, a short handwritten note saying that they offered an orientation on Saturday mornings and that I might come and see for myself. It was not a difficult choice, and that is how I found myself one Saturday morning in April looking for Japanese temple and finding only a small ordinary bungalow on a residential street in Pacific Beach. I was pretty sure I was in the wrong place as I hesitated walking up the driveway, but I received a warm welcome and was brought to a small living room in the house next door with a handful of other seekers. I honestly don't recall what was said in the orientation, something about sitting upright and breathing. I was so surprised by this ordinary living room with Its sofa table and chairs, coffee table with books neatly stacked on it, and spectacular flower arrangement, but there was no sign of monks in robes with shaved heads.
I had never met a Zen master in person, but I had seen pictures. The Zen master was a Japanese man with a shaved head and elegant black robes, a majestic, imposing presence. So I was filled with anticipation when the orientation leader said that we would be meeting Joko. Soon we were ushered into Joko's tiny interview room, a bedroom in the back house, furnished only with a small altar on a side table and Joko herself, sitting on a zafu and zabuton. It looked like anyone's grandmother in her 70s, with gray hair, a wrinkled face, and eyes that were keen but kindly. She wore, improbably, a pink polo shirt and gray skirt tucked neatly around her knees. In front of her lay a small wooden staff with a curl at one end. But I felt immediately a powerful, energetic force radiating from her, as if I had laid my bare hands on an electric fence. Ask me anything you like, she said. Apparently, the others had nothing, felt nothing, because the questions they asked were mundane, even disrespectful. Noting the small staff, one young man asked, "Are you going to hit us with that?" I was shocked that he had even thought such a thing. I said nothing, stunned by her presence, her electric energy, even though she was simply sitting there with an amused smile. That was our first encounter. I left reeling and intimately connected with her somehow. I knew she would be my teacher.
Ramona, I think you're muted.
Yes, I couldn't see the words. There's something not quite right. Were the last things Peg read, I knew she would be my teacher? Yeah. Okay. Little Ranch House in Pacific Beach was nestled in an ordinary residential neighborhood of similar houses on a quiet, sunny street lined with palm trees. Occasionally, an ice cream truck would cruise slowly down the street, and sometimes you can hear its jingle from The Sting in the background of Joko's recorded talks. The Zen Center actually occupied 2 adjoining properties. There was a small 2-story house where Joko lived, with a garage apartment behind it. The Zendo itself had been converted from a 2-bedroom, 1-bath bungalow with a tiny kitchen and a garage that had been turned into a large kitchen with commercial stoves and refrigerators, where session meals were prepared. The wall between the living room and the main bedroom had been opened up so that the main Zendo was a long L shape, including what had been the living room, dining room, and bedroom. All of these rooms were very small, so the space could only seat about 20. That's as much as I can see. 20 people. Another 6 or so could fit in the second bedroom space. The whole house was filled with neat, orderly rows of black Louboutins on pale wall-to-wall carpet. Sunlight streamed through large windows, filtered through blinds carefully adjusted during the day. Occasionally, you could hear the melodic sound of the wind chimes outside, lifted by a Pacific breeze. The feeling was calm, bright, intimate, and ordinary. Everything was neat, clean, and well maintained.
Can you make it a little bit larger? Thank you. Behind the sendo was another small house where Yoko met students one-on-one for Daisan practice interview. In the tiny room where I had first met her, in the living room, a line of sabutons wound around the room from the doorway. There we lined up, waiting to see her in turn when she rang her bell. If you were at the front of the line, you rang the bell in front of you in response. Her door will open, and you and the study living would do a full bow to the altar before you were left utterly alone with her, as vast as the Pacific Ocean at her back, as clear as the spotless blue California sky above. Now, what can you say?
But I had not gotten there yet. I had filled out an application for membership with ZCSD. With my schedule of graduate school, teaching, part-time work, and time with Ben, I was usually only able to come for the Wednesday evening program, 2 sitting periods with Kinhen in between, followed by a short informal Dharma talk, sometimes by Joko or otherwise by her students, Elizabeth or Ezra. Dai's son with Joko was announced by her Jisha, standing in the doorway of the Zendo. Dai's son with Joko is available for Zen Center members with a daily sitting practice. The first call is from members from out of town. After several months, I saw Elizabeth on the patio and asked when I might know if my application had been approved so that, as a member, I could see Joko and Dai-san. She looked startled and then kindly said, "Everyone is approved. See her anytime." And so it began. Because of that modest temple in an ordinary house, on an ordinary street, in an ordinary neighborhood, I knew what to do years later for my tiny Sangha in Austin that had proven their steadfast commitment in a storefront Unitarian church, in an elementary school cafeteria, sitting zazen on linoleum floors under buzzing fluorescent lights, in corner of a yoga studio, in another Zen Center's spare room, through my many absences for conferences and consulting, for academic leaves spent in San Diego with Joko.
Donna?
Let's see, you moved around.
Over
so
10 years. Over 10 years.
Okay. Thank you. Over 10 years, they had been ever faithful in the ordinary mind model Joko had created. What else could I do? I moved their Sangha, all 6 of them, into my house, moving all the furniture out of the living and dining room and setting up an altar. Finally, a permanent altar. It was September 5th, 2005, nearly 4 years after 9/11, and 1 year after I had been formally ordained as a Zodo Zen priest at Austin Zen Center.
All of that came much later, however. Everyone thinks I'm opposed to forms of traditional Japanese Zen practice, she once told me. I'm not opposed to the forms. When they are properly done, they are beautiful. When we moved to San Diego and started the center, we were trying to do a formal practice here, but no one was trained. My daughter Brenda at that time was a foremost expert on Soto Zen Japanese ritual. When she came for a visit, she said, Mom, you're doing this all wrong. It's a mess. Nobody knows what they're doing. Just drop everything you don't need. So I stripped away everything that was not essential to the practice. And it was true. Her practice was spare. Zazen, Kinhen, Dharma talks, Daisan. There were 2 daily chants. In the morning, the robe chant, although no one wore a robe, or even the Rakatsu, its miniature variant, and after Zazen, the four practice principles. These were rendered in fresh translations she developed with the poet Alan Capro. At the end, there were 3 full bows. In the whole time I was with Joko, I never saw a ceremony or even a full Zen service. They never chanted the Heart Sutra. She once told me that the Sangha was not ready for the Heart Sutra, but she had kept Zazen, pure Zazen, on Zapus and Sabatons, the wooden clappers that summoned folks for Zazen, the 3 bells that signal the start of a sitting period, 2 bells for Kinhin, and 1 bell to end Zazen. It was utter simplicity. And then we should, I think, read this. Or is this repeated from the?
It's just a repeated quote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there were the sessions, also spare and powerful. Joko was quick to point out to me, I'm not the only one doing this. There are others, Tony Packer, and others as well. But I had no idea of practice in other places or of the many formal aspects of Soto Zen practice in the Japanese tradition, the teachings of Zen ancestors, or even the history of Buddhism. Joko and ZCSD and a few books on Zen were my entire Zen universe. It was simple, beautiful, an ordinary universe, and perfectly necessary to me.
Joko told me that she had been invited to meet with the teachers at Naropa, a Tibetan Buddhist university in Boulder that had been founded by Chogyam Trungpa. She had been sharply critical of the special world they were creating apart from their students' everyday lives, so that some students had even left their jobs, gotten divorced, abandoned their friends. Joko was strong in her criticism, both with them and to me afterwards. Later, I learned that at dinner with the senior teachers, Joko had turned to one and asked, "How do you practice with your anger?" The teacher gave some response, but she was annoyed. She had been teaching and practicing for 25 years. She didn't have anger. She drove home in a fury, but halfway there, she recognized her situation. I know this because she told me herself.
After Joko's visit, she and another senior teacher came secretly under assumed names to a session with Joko. Wait a minute, after Joko's visit. Okay. While I was staying in the garage apartment, they came back from Daizan with her looking shell-shocked. Now we finally understand what our Tibetan teachers have been trying to teach us all these years. But we thought that it was because they were men, or because the language barrier, or the cultural differences that we just didn't get it. She was still stunned. Joko is 1 in a million, she said. Well, yes, I replied. That is why we are here.
In the sendo, there is nothing fancy. We just come and sit. After communicating with each other, we go home and resume our own everyday activity as a continuity of our pure practice, enjoying our true way of life. Yet this is very unusual. Wherever I go, people ask me, what is Buddhism? You can imagine how I feel. But here we just practice Zazen. That is all we do, and we are happy in this practice. For us, there is no need to understand what Zen is. We are practicing Zazen, so for us, there is no need to know what Zen is intellectually. This is, I think, very unusual for American society. Shunryo Suzuki, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind.
Joko didn't have a residential center, but she let me stay there in the garage apartment whenever I had a semester leave from UT. During sessions, the apartment would be taken over by session participants, sleeping on every square inch of the floor. Otherwise, it was all mine. During the day, I would often drive up the coast to UCSD and hang out with Ed Hutchins and the grad students in his distributed cognition lab. I went to lab meetings, studying how he was mentoring and instructing these emerging cognitive scientists. I wanted to learn how to better foster our own graduate students working in our lab. We'd often have lunch meetings among the eucalyptus trees, talking about cognitive science, teaching, and his current project on navigation in high-tech environments. As I drove home, I stopped at La Jolla Shores and sat on the beach, letting the sound of the surf wash through me until the glorious Pacific sunset.
Mornings, I sat zazen with the few people who showed up, and sometimes went out to breakfast with one or two. In between, I had time to see Joko in her little house. She was quite busy with phone, design, talking to students all over the world, and I tried to allow her space. I didn't want to bother her. Now I consider that a grave mistake. I guess I didn't trust her to protect that space in time herself. But mostly it was that childhood conditioning. The parents, wrapped up in their own lives, did not welcome the interruptions and inconveniences of children. Were not actually interested in us. We were on our own mostly, and it was best if we were either quiet and invisible or entertaining. I couldn't imagine entertaining Joko, so quiet and invisible. It was. It never occurred to me that she might enjoy the compassionate companion. She might enjoy my companionship despite all the evidence of that.
Still, we had many wonderful conversations. When I lamented that teaching and directing the CWRL left me without much time for practice beyond my morning zazen and kept me from coming for sessions, she promptly replied, "Your lab is your zendo." Gradually, I found out more about Joko's background. As we talked, I read the collection of her talks. As we talked, I read the collection of her talks, Everyday Zen, that had just come out, and I learned she had been happily married to a brilliant young biochemistry professor at the University of Michigan, a faculty wife who arranged luncheons and entertained with 4 small children. Suddenly, tragedy struck as her husband was afflicted with schizophrenia and grew so irrational and violent that he had to be institutionalized, where he lived until his death. Once, she told me, he had thrown a knife at her while she was holding their baby. She had instinctively thrown the infant out the window to one of the older children standing outside in the snow. I can't imagine how chilling such a life must be.
She moved to California with her children and took a position as the coordinator for the chemistry department at UCSD. Once she had been a concert-level pianist and a professional caliber swimmer, but now she was consumed with work and care for her children.
With a friend, she went to a talk given by Soen Nakagawa Roshi, a Zen teacher from Japan. She was so struck by his demeanor that she asked if she could study with him. He was leading a session and she signed up, filled with anticipation. In her first meeting, she told him she was ready for enlightenment. In the kitchen, and that entire session, she scrubbed, dismantled, cleaned, and mopped the kitchen over and over from early morning until late at night. She got no break and she was exhausted. Finally, one day she was given a short break and she went to her bed to take a nap, but someone else was already napping in her bed. Resigned, she went back to the kitchen. He spent no time in the zendo or in dokusan with the teacher. He just cleaned and cleaned what had been cleaned again. It broke down something in her, and she later described it as a turning point, an incredibly valuable teaching. Eventually, Soen Roshi had to return to Japan, and he told Joko she should work with Taizan Maizumi Roshi, the Zen teacher at ZCLA, Los Angeles. It's a 3.5-hour drive on a good day, but Joko began regularly attending.
The case. A monk asked Joshu in all earnestness, I have just entered this monastery. I beg you, master, please give me instructions. Joshu asked, have you eaten your rice gruel yet? The monk answered, yes, I have. Joshu said, then wash your bowls. The monk attained some realization. Kaun Yamada, The Gateless Gate, the classic book of Zen koans.
I could not believe the parallels in our stories. She had lost a living husband, just as I had, and she had been a single mother, just like me, although for 4 children, not just one. This made my life seem easy by comparison. She had worked in the same academic environment I was navigating as a grad student, only she had managed somehow to get formal Zen training at a real residential Zen center with a genuine Japanese male teacher. I was wistful about that, and I was captivated by her energy, her raw courage.
With Hakun Yasutani, she had completed the koan curriculum, but she was generally dismissive of koan study. She said she had worked with some students on koans at their request, and in fact, I did some koan study with her, curious about that way of practice and study. But she said, everybody thinks koan study will lead to enlightenment, but I know too many people who have completed koan study and are still not very nice people. It would be nice if it were true, but it's not. Her direct, pragmatic, laser-like intelligence and her practical way of teaching was bracing and sometimes terrifying.
A nuclear family had detonated at ground zero, and the radiation was killing me. It was not about who was right or wrong. It was not about good or bad. It was a hurricane, an inferno, like a broken, ashen survivor. I looked for a Zen center and found ZCSD. When I finally met Joko in that first Zazen, I was scared. I said, I don't know who I am. The person I thought I was has been completely demolished. There is nothing there, she said firmly. That is a perfect place to begin.
In the next diasant, Joko asked me, "Why are you here?" I knew this was not a trivial question. From deep inside me came the answer, "I want to be a better mother." "Well, that's a story," she replied briskly. I was stunned. I felt as if she had dumped a pitcher of ice water on top of my head. And she was ringing the bell, so I had no choice but to get up and leave. My mind was blank as I drove home. I knew she was right, but what? Slowly I comprehended it. My constant sense of being so far from the mother Ben deserved, my impossible ideal of what a mother should be and do, my sense of apology and failure and longing for a better self were poisoning my relationship with my son. As I dropped all of that story, I began to be able to relate with him directly and without regret or remorse. That was an enormously liberating experience. Okay.
I have a quick question before reading. I
Yes.
was wondering if she was caring while saying this sort of stuff, like, that's a good story.
Well, she was like a spirit of truth, I would say. So she was caring in that regard.
Thank you. Sejin's thesis SD began with a lottery. You submitted an application postmarked no earlier than a certain date. It wasn't completely random. Joko reviewed applications and personally selected some applicants. Someone applying from Germany, someone with experience as a session cook, someone who had been passed over before. You had to list skills on the application because serious work could be done during work period that week. Electrical, carpentry, painting, plumbing, landscaping, in addition to regular chores such as cleaning bathrooms, vacuuming, washing windows, and preparing meals. All of the materials and supplies could be purchased and made ready in advance by the work leader. Groceries were purchased and stored by the head cook.
Okay, so that's 8 o'clock. When we were planning to stop, right, Kim?
Yes.
Okay.
So page 42.
You guys are reading faster. I'm gonna have to write faster. All right. Okay, so do we want to have about 15 minutes of writing time? Till about quarter after.
Okay.
This is promptless writing. It's just whatever this evokes in you, or whatever reflection you might have, maybe even process and path. It's anything you want to write, and you can share it or not share it if you like after.
You said 10 minutes?
15 minutes.
Thanks.
First of all, thanks for reading tonight. I'm really grateful to be able to hear it in other voices. Okay. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Either thoughts about the reading or from your writing?
I can.
Okay.
I liked the question about whether Joko was loving. This was Milen's question. As she said, that's a story. Did she meet Peg? Did she have compassion? Was it like slapping the student? And why did Peg stay after hearing that? And here, Joko hit a home run, but I wonder how many times she struck out with other students. Is it possible to bat 1,000? I don't think so. I also was interested in her shedding of forms and her comment that some people who did koan study weren't nice people. Was she a nice person when she told Peg, that's the story? What is a nice person anyway? Is it really what is best? Did she exemplify that? And I know, Peg, you've said that she really was concerned with the students.
She deeply loved students, but it often didn't look sentimental. It didn't look, the way we might conventionally think about care. But she was always asking me to talk to somebody or look after somebody or ask my advice about some student. And I could see from all the things that she did, there was a lot of care. She was really worried. I was wrapped up in a story that was a very damaging story. And she did the most efficient thing she could do to cut through that story. It was remarkable. I don't think I've ever felt so cared for.
At the moment?
Yeah.
That's neat. It's like a surgeon.
Exactly. It's exactly like a surgeon. She was surgical. She was like laser surgery. Yeah. It was very freeing. And that was what I needed. Yeah, no, those were great questions. Yeah. Yeah, Milan. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
I can share what I wrote, and I liked Kim that you said loving, but I said caring.
Yeah, that wasn't correct what I said.
Wasn't accurate.
What's your story? A story, a perfect place to start. Who are we? Who are we without stories? Who am I without them? I just entered the apartment with street shoes because I was late. I had to put them out during the break. I went back and turned off all the unused lights because the use of electricity contributes enormously to global warming. At least, that's the story I tell myself usually. Actually, I just noticed I'm writing a novel related with that, so it may be quite a story to me. What if there's no story? If there are no misclassified articles, no global warming? I am noticing most of the stories we all tell are like quicksand. Some of them maybe just move and get you somehow stuck, but some of them completely swallow you. I am thinking of positive stories just to prove me wrong, but even the story of love, of peace, or song may fall in the quicksand category. So no story. How to start from that?
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, I think Joko would definitely agree with you. Stories are quicksand, especially when they establish some ideal. Yeah, totally. Starlet.
I wrote a thought. Like a river, the course of life changes through our lives. Like a river, the course of life changes throughout our lives. What we thought was a done deal crumbled away. The unthinkable becomes possible, and life keeps moving forward, and we with it, finding meaning through the journey of life.
I like that.
Thank you.
The river metaphor returns.
It really meant a lot to me. It has stuck with me.
Yeah, I see that. That's wonderful. Donna?
I have a image.
Oh, you want to share it?
Yes, please.
Okay, you can do it.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, I'm not sure if it's related, somehow related, but I
That's
have
okay.
one that is.
Mm.
So those are the dark clouds with the sun. Oops, let me do this. I don't know what those things are there.
I was
I don't know
about
if those
to
are,
ask you.
I don't know if those are birds or what, but I did tell it to swirl the red and the blue. So that was by design.
Amazing.
And then the other one I have, which it really didn't do what I wanted, but this is the church
Oh,
from your book,
uh-huh.
but it didn't do what I wanted. I wanted the red to come up and go into the open door of the church. I wanted the red and the blue to
To enter
swirl together and come up into the church, but
uh-huh.
it did not do what I intended.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Great colors. Great concepts. Mm. Well, I guess I can read what I have here. All my things are sort of oriented towards the project. I'm wondering how all this autobiographical material is striking readers. Maybe it's unnecessary or even a hindrance. It may be something to strip away as non-essential, but it also makes the book more personal, less abstract. This is what I have a hard time discerning. I'm grateful for these readers for their willingness and generosity. Maybe this is a foolish idea, this whole project, but I'm compelled to write it anyway. So much that is good has come out of Appamada's development. I'm so continually amazed by it. I want the world to know this, to know what it's taken to give it a clear, stable structure based on foundational principles from the Dharma, to know about the people who have committed their time and energy to it. This is the most satisfying work I've ever done, the highest and best use of me, my body, heart, and mind. It makes me filled with wonder and gladness. But of course, other people have their own perspectives. Appamada could seem ungainly, awkward, like homemade clothing that is clumsy and poorly sewn to some who favor the traditional forms. That's as far as I got. So the ongoing perplexities of the writer, you know.
I would like to ask you something of what we read today, if that's okay. About the koans.
Uh-huh.
About the koans. I didn't. I never thought of them as a way of finding enlightenment. I thought of them as a way of gaining wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did you feel about koans? I know that Yoko didn't like them.
It's not that she didn't like them. Joko was always doing battle against people's preconceptions about what Zen was. She said, you know, you don't even have to call it Zen because she'd have to dismantle people's sort of romantic ideals about it. So people had a romantic ideal about koans. Not so much now, I don't think, because there's much more openness and discussion about koan study itself. But people who came to her, and what she saw in her own koan study with Yasutani was people striving and people trying to succeed at something and trying to make some kind of progress through the koan curriculum. And she felt that was kind of a folly. it wasn't that she didn't like koans. She, would drop them into her talks all the time. But what she felt was that people had an idealistic notion about what koan study is and does. And so from my own standpoint, I wrestled with koans pretty hard and pretty, I would say, incompetently for quite a while. And it took me a long time to appreciate what they contribute to our ways of understanding how language and meaning and reality intersect. Um, so they're so unconventional in their construction. They're so surprising that I think they're really, really valuable, and but that people don't understand how to use them, quite how to use them. So that's why you need to work with a teacher who does koan study, and who understands how to teach from koans. So otherwise, you can be just sort of, in a way, fooling around on the surface, I think.
So what are koans for you?
I think they're kind of a direct path to the interior. So the way we meet koans and the way we approach a koan is so dependent on our conditioning and so revealing of our conditioning. You can see right away the thoughts, this is humiliating. Other people are getting this, I'm not getting this. No, maybe that's just me. I'm not going to be able to get this. I'm too obtuse. Other people, they're just immediately, grasping a koan and how it's working. It took me a long time to be able to be playful with koans and to be able to understand how we come to recognize that this particular koan that I'm in the middle of actually is about my life. It's actually about the life I'm living right now in traffic and at my work and with the people that I'm arguing with. It's actually about that. And it's not just some, quirky historical story set 1,000 years ago in China. So, so it's a whole universe. Koans are a whole universe in it that dismantles our commonplace notions about what our language means, what it points to. So,
Thank you.
yeah, that's my understanding anyway. I mean, everybody has a different perspective, as I said, and I love them now. I love the richness of them and the way that they really provoke you, provoke your wonder.
I really appreciate you sharing this because I have not thought of it like that, and it's a beautiful way of thinking of koans.
Mm. Yeah,
Thank you.
when I went to the monastery, they did a fair amount of koan study at the monastery. And when I went to the monastery, I was talking to Chosen about what a big struggle koans were, for me, and how, what an effort I was putting into it, and with so little result. And she said, I always felt like koans were like, well, it's like a big box of candy. Each one is a different. I'm just like, what? Of candy? I'm beating my brains out trying to get somewhere with Moo. And she's like, a box of candy, really? So she felt each koan was like another little bonbon. And that was a novel way to think about it for me.
And I think it extends to thinking about life.
Absolutely.
Is life a box of candy or is it a awful struggle?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not just like telling someone, well, you just have to like have a better point of view or you have to have a better attitude toward it. it's like recognizing, oh, this is the way I'm doing this is exactly the way I would do anything, like it was exactly the way I learned to drive a car. I can't do this. Other people are, they've been driving tractors on the farm since they were 14 years old. And I'm just, getting into a car for the first time. And it's like I've never seen a car before or been in a car before, and I'm, so you start to see, oh, this is kind of a pattern, I go to graduate school. I'm like, everybody else is so smart here and I'm never going to get this. I'm too dense to actually get these ideas that people are talking about. It's just like the same thing, And you start to see, oh, man, it's just koans are just a mirror. They're just a mirror. So funny. But I think, Joko was very spoiled. She was, she was not an elaborator. She was I would say, a distiller. So, yeah, very direct. Anyway, we're at the end of our time. Thank you so much. This is so helpful talking this through. And if you have other thoughts, you can email me. If you, later think, oh, I should have said something about this, or should have stopped her, or whatever.
I would like to suggest that you include in your book what you just shared with us about koans.
I don't know. I guess it's recorded because there's no way I could remember all of that. But I think it's it was not a big part of my training with Joko, but I came to have a different understanding of it. And I did work with koans with her, and it was playful. It was like playing. It was just like playing with a friend, like I can't even describe. It was just so playful. Now, then when I went to the monastery, it was so hard and heavy and difficult. And I saw, oh, it's like a lot of it depends on who you're playing the game with. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's wonderful to be with you and to see you and hear your thoughts. It's so helpful and so wonderful to get different perspectives in this way.
Friday night, we're watching the movie How to Cook Your Life.
Oh,
and
great.
So, and that's very playful too.
Yeah, that'll be wonderful.
7 o'clock. Okay.
All right. Okay, take care, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you.